I didn't plan on moving to Vermont in the dead of winter. Nobody does. But after the breakup, the kind where your life splits open like thin ice, I needed distance. Real distance. I left Boston in a rush, stuffing clothes and old resentment into cardboard boxes, and drove until the city lights disappeared and the world narrowed into snowy woods and one-lane roads. The town of Brookside sat quietly along a frozen canal, all white rooftops and quiet streets, the kind of place postcards pretend still exist. My new apartment was at the top of an old Victorian building painted a tired shade of blue-gray. It had slanted ceilings, Victorian moldings, and the distinct feeling that the floorboards remembered more lives than I ever would. But it was cheap, furnished, and came with a month of free utilities. That was enough for me. I arrived in the middle of heavy snowfall. The building manager, a tired man named Mitchell, muttered a quick introduction before handing me the key. Top floor, end of the hall. Radiators bang at night, so don't call me unless something's actually on fire, he said. I smiled politely, though I was shivering too hard to respond. The first week was peaceful. Too peaceful. The silence felt unfamiliar after years of traffic, voices, and the constant pulse of the city. Here, the nights stretched long and empty, broken only by the groaning radiators and the wind scraping across the old windows. If loneliness made a sound, it would be that. I spent most evenings unpacking and watching the snow fall over the canal. That's when I first noticed the light. Across the narrow courtyard was another Victorian building, nearly identical to mine. One window, third floor, far right, always glowing a muted yellow, like an old bedside lamp left on for a child afraid of the dark. I assumed it belonged to someone who read late or worked night shifts, but as the days passed, I never saw movement, never heard noise, never even spotted a silhouette. Just that single, unwavering light. Back then, I thought the town was simply quiet. I didn't know it was watching. The scratching started on my 7th night. It was barely past midnight when I heard it. A thin, deliberate scraping across the window pane behind my bed. I sat up instantly, my pulse jumping. The wind was strong. That was what I told myself. Snow and ice sliding down the gutters, maybe a branch knocking against the wall. Rational explanations. But the sound came again. Scrape. Scrape. Slow. Too slow for wind. Too intentional for anything natural. I grabbed my phone, turned on the flashlight, and crept toward the window. The glass was coated in frost so thick it looked painted on, and my breath fogged the air in front of me. I pressed my ear against the icy pane, listening. Silence. I let out the breath I'd been holding. Probably nothing, just winter being dramatic. But as I turned away, something knocked lightly from the other side. 2 taps. I froze. Then the light in the apartment across the courtyard flickered. Not a steady dimming like a faulty bulb, but a sharp, deliberate pulse, like someone signaling. The scratching didn't return that night, but sleep didn't either. I lay awake until the sun showed itself, thin and weak behind the gray sky. When I finally stepped out to grab coffee, the hallway was colder than it should have been. While locking my door, I overheard the tenant 2 doors down speaking to her partner. Heard something last night again, like someone trying to open the window. My stomach tightened. When I reached the courtyard, I glanced up at the opposite building's window. The light was still glowing, faint but steady. That afternoon, I asked Mitchell casually, "Who lives across the courtyard? 3rd floor, right window?" He looked up from his paperwork. "No one. That unit's been empty since October." "But the light?" He shrugged. "Electric's been shut off for months. Must be catching reflection from the street." There were no streetlights facing that window. I didn't argue. But that night, when the clock struck 12, the scratching began again. And this time, It sounded closer. I tried ignoring it. I really did. But by the 10th night, the sound had changed. It wasn't scratching anymore. It was knocking. Soft, rhythmic, exactly 3 taps each time. The kind of knock someone uses when they don't want to wake the whole building, only the person inside. That evening, a storm blew through town, painting everything in thick white powder and freezing the air to the point where breathing hurt. After work, I trudged up the steps of the building, grocery bags cutting into my gloves. When I reached my door, my key wouldn't turn. The lock was frozen solid. I leaned closer, breathing warm air onto it, trying to melt the ice. While crouched there, I felt it. A presence behind me. Not footsteps, not breathing. Just the unmistakable feeling of someone standing close enough to touch. I whipped around, heart slamming against my ribs. The hallway was empty, but across the courtyard, the light flickered again. Only this time, a shadow moved behind it. Slow, deliberate, crossing the room like someone pacing. My hands trembled as I forced the key until it finally clicked open. I shoved myself inside and locked the door 3 times. That night, I kept every light on. I kept the knife from the kitchen next to my bed. I stayed awake until 2 a.m., trying to convince myself it was all in my head. Then the footsteps started. Not from upstairs, not from the courtyard. Right outside my door, pacing, stopping, starting again. I gripped the knife so tightly my fingers went numb. Then the tapping on the door began. Soft, precise, intentional, followed by a whisper. Open. Barely audible, but real. Too real. I pressed my back against the door, feeling the cold seep through it, hearing the faint sound of someone breathing on the other side. I didn't sleep until daylight. The next morning, I marched straight to Mitchell's office. I heard someone outside my door last night, I said. Footsteps, knocking, whispering. He rubbed his tired eyes. Look, winter messes with sound in these old buildings. Pipes expand, wood contracts. You hear things that aren't really there. Whispers are not pipes, Mitchell. He paused, studying my face. I wasn't joking. Finally, he exhaled. What apartment did you say again? Across the courtyard? Yes, I said quickly. The one with the light on? He shook his head. There's no electricity in that unit, I swear it. Then what's lighting the window? He didn't have an answer. That evening, I talked to my neighbor, Carla, the one I overheard earlier. You hear stuff too? She asked. Almost every night. She lowered her voice. People talk about that courtyard unit. Last winter, someone swore they saw a figure inside. Cleaning staff refuses to go in after dark. Why? She hesitated. Because the temperature inside is always freezing, even with the heat on full blast. My stomach tightened. That night, the scratching at my window returned. Slow, patient, as if whoever, or whatever, was learning the rhythm of the sound that rattled me most. At 1:57 a.m., the light across the courtyard flickered violently, then went out completely for the first time. Relief washed over me, until a new light appeared. A pale glow from my own window. Something was reflecting light onto the frost. Something standing just out of sight. When the knocking on my door began again, faster this time, almost frantic, I didn't move. I didn't breathe. And when the whisper came, it wasn't a request. It was a command. Let me in. I didn't open the door. I pressed my entire weight against it until the knocking stopped. At sunrise, I packed a backpack, grabbed my documents, and walked out without looking back. I didn't bother calling Mitchell. I didn't bother turning in my keys. I spent the next few nights in a motel on the edge of town, its thin walls and buzzing heater more comforting than the silence of that Victorian building. But even there, The cold seemed to follow me. One night, around 3 a.m., I woke to a familiar sound. 2 faint taps on the motel window. I jolted upright. The curtain swayed slightly, like someone had brushed against it. I didn't dare look. I left that morning and moved back to Boston by the weekend. My friends laughed when I told them the story. Stress, they said. Breakup trauma, they said. But something else happened last week. I was getting ready for bed when a soft knock echoed from the hallway of my new apartment. 3 taps this time. Then a whisper I recognized too easily. Still awake? My blood froze. It had followed me. Whatever lived in that courtyard, in that vacant room with a light that shouldn't glow, it had chosen me. And no matter how far I go, some shadows aren't tied to places. They're tied to people. And now, it knows where I sleep. Long before that winter, I never thought of myself as someone who got scared easily. I grew up in northern Minnesota, where winter practically taught you to be tough. Ice storms, whiteouts, blackouts, all of it. But there's a difference between cold that bites your skin and cold that reaches inside you. I didn't know that yet. When I landed a mid-year internship at Weybridge University, an old private school tucked into the hills of Vermont, I felt lucky. It meant real experience, a small stipend, and a chance at a future job. They placed me in Foster Hall, one of the oldest dorms still in use. Students joked that it should have been condemned years ago. Too drafty, too creaky, too forgotten, but the school insisted it had historic value. The first day I stepped inside, I could smell it. A stale mixture of dust, old wood, and something faintly metallic, like ice beginning to form. My roommate, Paige, was warm and hyper in the way only theater majors can be. She flung her scarf onto her bed and announced, "Welcome to the coldest building in New England. If we survive, we deserve an A." I laughed, but the chill in the hallway didn't feel normal. That week, the temperature plummeted to single digits. The radiators coughed more than they warmed. At night, the frost on the windows thickened into patterns that looked almost intentional. Loops, arcs, crooked lines like long fingers dragging downward. I kept telling myself it was just the building settling, pipes shrinking in the cold, wind slipping through gaps in the old brick. But on the 3rd night, something changed. Paige texted she'd be staying out late with friends and not to wait up. I nodded to the empty room, triple-locked the door, and left the tiny nightlight glowing on the desk. I buried myself under blankets and listened to the halls groan under the frozen weight of the night. I didn't know then that, before morning came, something would glide into my room, something colder than the wind, quieter than snow falling, and I would never look at winter the same way again. It must have been around 2 a.m. when I woke up, though my phone screen was too bright for my eyes to read the exact time. I drifted between dream and waking, unsure why I had snapped out of sleep. The room felt colder than when I'd gone to bed, cold enough that my breath made a thin fog in front of me. That's when I noticed it. A shape, dark, tall, vaguely human, stood near the door. I didn't sit up. I couldn't. It felt like my body had been poured into the mattress, frozen into it. My limbs were heavy, numb, locked in place. My heartbeat hammered loud enough I wondered if the thing could hear it. The figure didn't move at first. It hovered, as if listening. Then it began gliding across the frost-laced floor. No footsteps, no sound, just a slow, silent drift. "Paige?" I whispered, even though I already knew it wasn't her. It didn't respond. The air thickened, colder and heavier the closer it came, as if it was carrying winter inside it. The nightlight flickered when it reached the foot of my bed. I couldn't make out the features, only the outline of a person standing just inches from me. The dark seemed to cling to it, like it was wrapped in shadow instead of clothing. I tried to scream. Nothing came out. My throat locked. The figure leaned forward, its presence filling the space above me. For a moment, everything felt suspended. My breath, the room, even time. Then it vanished. Not walked away, not faded, just gone. The air rushed back into my lungs so fast I coughed. My fingers tingled painfully as sensation returned. I scrambled up, flicking on the lamp with shaking hands. The room was empty. But the door I had triple locked, was cracked open, just enough for a sliver of hallway air to slip in, carrying a faint, icy breeze. I stayed awake until sunrise, wrapped in blankets, staring at the door as if it might open further. By morning, the room looked normal again. The frost on the windows had melted into watery streaks, and the radiator produced just enough heat to make the air breathable. But I couldn't shake what I'd seen. Paige stumbled in around 10, wearing sunglasses and smelling like cheap beer. "You look like death," she said, dropping onto her bed. "Someone was in the room last night," I whispered. The door was open. She lifted an eyebrow. "Did you check your locks?" I triple-checked them. And the door magically unlocked itself. She laughed, but it felt forced. "I'm serious, Paige." She sat up, her face softening. "Okay, tell me what happened." I told her everything. The shadow, the cold, the way it leaned over me. She listened quietly, fingers twisting the edge of her blanket. "Yeah, no," she finally said. "That's sleep paralysis. Has to be." Sleep paralysis doesn't unlock doors. She didn't have an answer for that. Later that day, I mentioned the cold drafts to a student named Mark at the dining hall. He glanced around before leaning closer. "You're in Foster Hall, right?" "Yeah." He lowered his voice. "People hear things in that building. Whispers, footsteps, tapping windows even when the weather's calm." "Like ghost stories?" "No one wants to call it that," he said. "But ask around. You're not the first." I did ask around, and the stories came out reluctantly. I saw a shadow near the stairwell once. Thought it was another student, but it vanished when I got close. The windows freeze over only in some rooms, not others, like cold pockets move around. I heard someone breathing in my closet. The building felt different after that. Not haunted exactly, just watched. That night when the temperature dropped again, I stuffed a towel under the door, locked it, then locked it again, hands trembling. Paige was out late again. Around midnight, I heard a whisper through the vent. Not words, just the sound of someone exhaling icy air. I stayed awake until dawn. 2 nights later, the temperature dropped to 0. My phone buzzed with a campus alert. Heating system temporarily malfunctioning, extra blankets available in lobby. Great. Exactly what Foster Hall needed. More cold. Paige left after dinner, promising she'd be back before midnight. "You gonna be okay?" she asked, pulling on her boots. I hesitated. "Yeah." She must have seen something in my face because she squeezed my arm before leaving. "Lock up. I'll text you." I locked the door the moment she stepped into the hall. The building felt unusually quiet. Even the pipes seemed frozen silent. The only sound was the wind pushing against the windows, making them tremble. I layered 2 sweatshirts, wrapped myself in blankets, and kept my lamp on. Around 1:50 a.m., I dozed off, and at 2:04, according to the clock on my phone, I woke to that same paralyzing cold. The first thing I saw was the window. Frost climbed across it in thin, branching lines, forming, growing, spreading. Something was inside the room. I didn't see the shadow at first. I heard it. A soft scrape, like fabric sliding against wood. Then the dark shape emerged near Paige's empty bed. This time, I could see more detail. It looked human, tall, shoulders slumped, arms hanging stiffly at its sides. but its head tilted in a slow, unnatural motion, like it was studying the room. "Please," I whispered. "Please don't." The figure turned toward me. The cold hit like a wave, stealing my breath. My chest tightened, panic clawing up my ribs. It drifted forward, over the rug, past my desk, closer. A faint whisper rose around me, not from the hall, not from outside, but from inside the room. A breath, circling my ears. Then the figure reached the foot of my bed and bent forward. For the first time, I saw a glimpse of its face. Not features, not eyes, just darkness. A hollow shape where a face should be. And then, something knocked in the hallway. A sharp, hurried rap. The figure straightened, froze, then dissolved into the air like smoke whisked away by wind. The knock came again. "Hey, let me in!" Paige's voice. I shot out of bed, unlocked the door, and practically fell into her. "Are you okay?" she asked, staring at my trembling hands. "No," I whispered. "I'm not." The next morning, I asked to be moved to another building. The housing staff took one look at my pale face and agreed without asking questions. They told me it happened more often than you'd think. Paige helped me pack. She didn't make jokes. She didn't tease me. She just worked quietly, glancing at the window every few minutes like she expected something to appear there. "Did you hear anything last night?" I finally asked. She shook her head. "No. But when I got to the door, the air felt weird." "Weird how?" "Like someone just walked through it." We didn't talk after that. Not about the shadow, not about the cold. My new dorm was newer, brighter, warmer. No strange drafts, no frost patterns crawling across the glass, but I still couldn't sleep. Every night I checked the door 3 times, some nights 4. I kept a lamp on until sunrise. Anytime the temperature dropped outside, I felt my chest tighten, remembering that dark shape bending over me. By the end of the internship, I avoided Foster Hall entirely. Even walking past it made the air feel colder. On my last day, while waiting for my ride, I overheard 2 freshmen whispering. "Someone saw a shadow again on the 2nd floor," one said. "Thought they fixed the heating." They did, but the cold's still there. The other shivered. "Maybe it's just winter." Maybe. But deep down, I knew better. Some places don't warm up, no matter the season. Some cold lingers. Some shadows stay behind. And some doors, once opened, never truly lock again. I was 31 and driving from northern Idaho to Montana for a work conference that already felt like a waste of time. I was tired, irritable, and weeks behind on deadlines. My boss figured sticking me in a small-town hotel the night before the conference would keep me focused. What it kept me was alone. The storm rolled in earlier than forecasted. Thick flakes plastered the windshield faster than my wipers could clear them. The world shrank down to 2 streaks of light ahead of me, and whatever faint shapes drifted in the snow beyond the shoulder. About an hour into the storm, I saw headlights appear behind me. At first, I didn't think much of it, but the car hung there in my rearview mirror, never speeding up, never backing off. I turned onto Highway 7, the final stretch to the hotel I'd booked. The car followed. I slowed. It slowed. I sped up. It did too. "Great," I muttered. Either a tailgater or a bored local. But the longer it followed, the more something inside me began to crawl. When I finally reached the hotel, a squat brick building half swallowed by frozen trees and glowing weakly under a flickering streetlight, the other car pulled into the lot and parked directly across from me. Not next to me, not near the entrance, right across, headlights shining. I grabbed my bag and hurried inside, the wind biting my face. The lobby was dim, the air stale like the heat had been off all afternoon. A tired older man behind the counter checked me in with barely a glance. I asked, "Anyone else staying here tonight?" "Just you," he said. My stomach dropped. I didn't want to look back outside. I didn't want to confirm the car was still there, but I already knew it was. I carried my luggage down the hallway lined with old carpet that smelled faintly of mildew and something like wet pine. My room, 204, sat at the far end. When I unlocked the door, I didn't even turn on the light at first. I stood there in the dark, listening. Just the groan of the heater turning on, a distant hum from the lobby. No footsteps, no voice. I forced myself to shake it off. I'd had long drives before. Fatigue made every shadow look like a threat. Still, the moment I stepped into the room, I made sure the deadbolt, chain, and latch were all in place. The room itself was dated but clean enough. An old lamp, a stiff-looking bedspread, and a TV bolted to the dresser. I tossed my bag on the chair and walked to the window. The parking lot was still. Wind blew snow sideways beneath the streetlight. My breath fogged the glass as I leaned closer. The car that had followed me was still parked where it had stopped. Headlights off now. No movement. Just a dark shape idling in the cold. "Just leave," I whispered. "Please just leave." I waited. 5 minutes, 10, until my eyes burned. The car didn't move. No one got out. Eventually, trying not to look shaken, I let the curtain fall and sat on the edge of the bed. I tried distracting myself with TV, scrolling through my phone, telling myself I was being paranoid, but none of it worked. Around midnight, I finally lay down fully dressed. The storm roared outside against the wall, rattling the window. I kept my eyes closed, trying to sleep. That's when I heard the first beep. Not the heater, not the wind. A clear electronic beep coming from the lock on my door. My eyes snapped open. Another beep. The sound of a keycard trying the reader. I bolted upright, staring at the door, heart pounding so hard I felt it in my teeth. Someone was trying to get in, and I was alone on the only occupied floor of the hotel. My hand shook as I reached for the lamp. Even the soft click of the switch felt dangerously loud. Light flooded the room, warm but fragile against the pale fear crawling through me. Beep. I stared at the door. The handle twitched, not enough to turn it, but enough that I saw it move. "Hello?" I called out, voice steady in a way that surprised me. "Front desk, is that you?" No answer. Another beep. The small LED above the lock flashed red. Someone was trying the wrong card, or the right kind of card used in the wrong way. "Sir?" I tried again, louder. Nothing. I grabbed the hotel phone with my free hand and dialed the front desk. It rang twice before the old man answered. "This is room 204, I whispered. "Is anyone on this floor?" "No," he said. "Not unless you had a visitor." "I don't. Someone's trying to get into my room." There was a long pause. "Stay inside. Don't open the door." As if I needed to be told. The beeping stopped. The handle was still. Silence stretched thin and sharp. Then came the footsteps. Heavy footsteps thundering down the hallway, moving away from my door at a full sprint. I scrambled to the peephole. The hall lights flickered with the storm's power surges, and for a moment I saw the figure, a man in a heavy coat, hood pulled low, running toward the exit. My stomach dropped. It was the same silhouette from the car. I rushed to the window, fumbling with the curtain. The snowy lot glowed faintly under the lone streetlight. The stranger burst outside, slipping once on the ice before scrambling toward his car. He threw himself inside, engine flaring to life, headlights cutting through the snow like blades. The car skidded, fishtailing before straightening and speeding out of the lot. Within seconds, he was swallowed by the storm. Gone, but not forgotten. The hotel went dead quiet again. I sat on the bed, hands shaking, listening for more footsteps, more beeps, More anything. Nothing happened. The storm eased. My breathing slowed. But sleep didn't come. I didn't feel safe. Not in that hotel. Not in that room. Not anywhere near that highway. Something told me this wasn't over. At dawn, with almost no sleep and nerves raw as ice, I made my way to the lobby. The old man behind the counter looked up from his newspaper, eyes wide when he saw me. "You all right?" he asked. "No," I admitted. "Did you see the cameras? Did you get footage of the guy on my floor?" He slowly shook his head. "Power flickered too much last night. Cameras reset. Didn't record anything." Of course they didn't. I rubbed my face. Could he have had a MasterCard? Like a hotel universal key card? He frowned. "Not unless he stole one. Those only work for maintenance and management." "So, it's possible?" His silence was answer enough. I checked out with shaky hands. When I stepped outside, the cold sliced through my clothes, bitter and unwelcoming. My footprints from the night before had nearly vanished in the fresh snow, but his tire tracks were still there. Deep, fast, panicked. I loaded my bag into my car, but before getting in, I glanced around the lot. I half expected to see the strange car pulling back in, or the hooded man standing between the frozen trees. Nothing. Just the hollow quiet of a place too empty to feel safe. I drove off, gripping the wheel so tightly my knuckles went white. For the first 20 miles, I checked my mirror compulsively, terrified of seeing those headlights again. When I finally reached the next town, I pulled into a diner and ordered coffee. My hands still shook. While waiting, I pulled out my phone and Googled something I'd never thought to search before. Fake Universal Hotel keycards. Articles filled the screen. Cheap devices sold online that could unlock older hotel systems within seconds. Videos, tutorials, news stories about travelers waking up to intruders standing in their rooms. I swallowed hard. The man hadn't been confused, or tired, or at the wrong door. He'd known exactly what he was doing, and he had followed me for hours to do it. I made it to the conference, though I spent most of it staring out the window at the parking lot instead of listening to the speakers. By the time it ended, I'd already decided to skip my second night at the hotel and drive straight home. The organizers didn't argue. I must have looked like hell. The drive back was easier. The storm had passed, the sky clear, the roads finally plowed. Still, I never relaxed. Not once. Every time I saw headlights behind me, my throat tightened. I kept telling myself, "It's over. He's gone. You're safe." But that's the kind of thing you say when the truth would ruin you. What ruined me was the moment I stopped for gas in a small town 3 hours from home. As I pumped fuel, I scanned the lot the way I now did without thinking. A car drove by on the far side of the road. Same shape, same make, same dent on the rear bumper. My heart slammed against my ribs, but the car didn't turn in, didn't slow, didn't follow, just kept going. Still, my lungs didn't unlock until long after it was out of sight. When I finally reached home, I sat in my driveway for a long time. The porch light glowed warm against the snow, but I didn't step out until I was sure, absolutely sure, no one else had pulled in behind me. Inside, I locked the door, then the deadbolt, then the chain. Triple-checked them all. People say fear fades, but some fears don't. Some stay lodged under your skin, reminding you that safety is an illusion far thinner than you want to admit. A week later, I canceled every future hotel reservation I had for work, because now I knew that once a stranger chooses you as a target, you never see a hotel the same way again. And you never sleep as deeply either. Your instincts exist to protect you. If something feels wrong, someone following you, watching you, or trying to enter your space, trust that feeling. Awareness and caution can be the difference between safety and danger. Never ignore the signs your gut refuses to overlook. People always say winter camping is peaceful, quiet, clean, simple. I used to believe that myself. I liked the solitude, the silence, the feeling that the world had finally shut up long enough for me to breathe. But solitude cuts both ways. Quiet can comfort you, or it can turn on you. And the night this happened, it turned fast. I'd been going to Pineview Lake since I was a kid. My dad taught me to fish there, taught me how to judge ice thickness, how to follow the tree lines when the snow was too thick to see the trail. I knew that place better than my own backyard, or at least I thought I did. That March, the temperatures dipped lower than normal. The lake froze so solid you could drive across it, though I never liked taking chances. Still, I needed a break. A real one. Too many long weeks at work, too many nights staring at the ceiling feeling like life was grinding me down. So I took my truck and small camper out to my favorite spot on the North Shore. Thick pines surrounded the clearing and deadened the wind. The lake stretched out white and still, the moonlight bouncing off it like steel. After setting up, I took a walk along the shoreline. Snow crunched under my boots, the kind of sound that echoes when you're miles from anything. The wind bit my face, carried the smell of pine sap and frozen water. Everything looked familiar, until it didn't. That's when I saw it. A trailer, old, rusted, sagging, wedged crookedly between a cluster of snow-heavy trees. It hadn't been there in the fall. It was half hidden, tucked away like someone didn't want it found. My gut twisted. Nothing about it felt right. I stood there staring at it, breath fogging the air, feeling the woods pressing in on me. I told myself it was probably some ice fisher's abandoned rig. No need to jump to conclusions. But I kept looking, and the longer I looked, the more wrong it felt, like a secret shoved into the forest. Against every bit of better judgment I had, I walked toward it. Up close, the trailer looked even worse. The siding was buckled, blistered with rust. One window cracked like a spider web of frozen glass. It sat at an odd tilt, as if one side had sunk into the snow, or something heavy had shifted inside. "Hello?" I called, my voice sounding too loud in the stillness. No response. I knocked, gentle at first, then harder. The hollow thump vibrated through the frozen air. Still nothing. No stirring, no lights, no movement. I pressed my ear to the door. Nothing but the distant groan of wind pushing through branches. A smarter man would have walked away right then. But curiosity is a dangerous thing, especially when you're alone in a place you believe you know. I circled the trailer, crunching through snow piled nearly to my knees in drifts. Tracks, boot prints, led to the door, but none led away. "Okay, that's not great," I muttered. The prints were old, edges softened by snowfall, but still distinct enough to see their shape. Someone had come here intentionally, and for whatever reason, hadn't left. A cold shiver crawled up the back of my neck. I tried the door. Locked. Not frozen. Locked. A heavy thud sounded inside. Soft, but unmistakable. Like something shifting. I jerked back so fast I lost my footing, landing hard in the snow. My pulse hammered in my throat. I listened, barely breathing. But nothing else came from inside. No second thud. No footsteps. Just silence swallowing the woods again. "All right," I whispered to myself, brushing snow off my coat. That's enough weirdness for one night. I retreated toward my campsite, glancing over my shoulder every few steps. The trailer stood there quiet, half hidden under sagging pines, looking dead, yet somehow waiting. By the time I returned to my fire, the sun had dipped, the sky turning that bruised purple that comes before total darkness. I told myself I'd ignore the trailer, enjoy my night, eat my food, warm up by the flames. But even as I sat by the fire, coat thawing, fingers wrapped around a steaming mug, I couldn't shake the feeling that the forest around me had changed. like something else was awake in it now, and it knew I'd found its hiding place. Night in the woods is different from night anywhere else. It settles heavier, moves slower. Sound travels weirdly, bouncing between trees and coming back twisted. But even with all that, I know the difference between an animal and a person. And the steps I heard behind me were human. Slow, careful, deliberate. I froze with my cup halfway to my lips, staring into the flames. The crunching came from the dark tree line behind my camper, soft but steady. I didn't want to turn around, but I forced myself. Nothing, just shadows between the trunks, shifting in the firelight. "Anyone out there?" I called, trying to sound casual. The footsteps stopped. My skin crawled. A thin ribbon of cold wind slipped through the clearing and my fire hissed as sparks jumped. I grabbed my flashlight and pointed it toward the trees. That's when I saw it. A faint white glow weaving between the branches, like a flashlight or a lantern. "Hey!" I shouted. "You all right?" The light bobbed once, then cut out completely. Just darkness again. That's when real fear crept in. I backed toward the camper, keeping the flashlight trained on the trees. My breath came out in sharp white bursts. Okay. Just thinking," I whispered. "Probably a hiker, or some ice fisher checking traps. But hikers don't kill their light when they hear a voice, and trappers don't sneak." I threw more wood on the fire, the flames climbing higher, warming the space behind me. But the woods stayed dark, too dark. Then the steps returned, closer, softer. My nerves snapped. I spun around and yelled, "I know you're there! Just say something!" Nothing spoke, nothing moved. But I knew I wasn't alone. My flashlight caught something low to the ground. Prints, fresh tracks in the snow. Not mine, not boots. Wider, heavier. They came from the direction of the trailer. And now they circled my campsite. Every instinct in me screamed the same thing. "You need to leave, now." I grabbed the loose gear lying near the fire and shoved it all into the camper without bothering to organize anything. My hands shook, gloves slipping on metal buckles as I rushed. Behind me, a branch cracked. A single, sharp snap. That was enough. I slammed the camper door shut, threw myself into the truck and started the engine. I didn't look back, not even once. The trail out from Pineview Lake is narrow, winding between trees and ditches that fill with snow so deep you could disappear in one. I didn't care. I punched the gas harder than I should have, tires fishtailing on the icy ruts as the camper thumped behind me. The headlights carved through the swirling snow, but everything felt too close. The trees, the shadows, the dark. My rearview mirror was nothing but a smear of white, and yet I kept glancing at it, terrified I'd see a second pair of headlights behind me. My hands gripped the wheel so tight my knuckles burned. The adrenaline cut through the cold, through the panic, through everything except the pounding thought in my head. Someone was watching me. Someone was out there with me. And I don't know how long they'd been hiding in those woods. Halfway down the trail, I hit a deep drift. The truck lurched. The camper skidded sideways, the whole rig tilting like it might flip. I screamed a curse, easing off the gas and letting the tires bite into the snow before accelerating again. Just keep moving. Just get away. When I finally reached the paved county road, the relief hit so hard my eyes stung. I didn't stop until I reached town, pulling into a gas station lit up like a beacon. Only then did I let myself breathe. Only then did I look back. Nothing behind me. Nothing following. But somehow, it didn't feel like I'd escaped anything. It felt like I'd left something unfinished. Something that wasn't supposed to be found. I slept at home that night on the living room couch with every light on. And even then, Every distant sound outside made my heart jump. By morning, I'd convinced myself I overreacted, that it was probably some hermit, some hunter, someone who didn't like visitors, something bizarre but explainable. Then the police called, and everything got worse. The officer on the phone sounded cautious, like he wasn't sure how much to say. "You camp up at Pineview Lake last night?" "Yeah," I said. "Why?" "We got a call this morning. A hiker found drag marks. Thought it might be connected to something." My stomach dropped. Drag marks from what? That's what we're trying to figure out. I met them at the trail entrance an hour later. 2 cruisers, 3 officers, the wind cutting through their jackets just like it had mine the night before. They led me in on snowshoes, retracing my tire tracks until we reached the clearing. That's when I saw it. Where the trailer had sat, there was nothing. Just a wide patch of flattened snow and deep furrows leading away, carved like trenches. Drag marks, wide enough for a trailer. "Where does it go?" I asked. One officer pointed. "Toward the lake." The marks led straight across the clearing, down the small incline, and onto the frozen surface, then ended where the ice looked cracked and refrozen. A hole. Something big had broken through. The officer knelt, tapping the ice with his glove. "Whatever it was, it's under there now." I felt sick. It was a trailer. Someone pulled it into the lake. "Why?" another officer asked. I shook my head. I didn't want to guess. Didn't want to imagine what, or who, might have been inside it. One officer walked a few paces ahead, scanning the tree line. "You said you heard footsteps?" "Yeah," I said quietly. Someone was watching me. He pointed to a cluster of prints partially filled with drifting snow, bigger than mine, deeper. "These weren't your boots." I swallowed hard. Whoever had been out there hadn't just been wandering. They'd been closing in on my camp. And by dragging the trailer into the lake overnight, they'd erased whatever evidence it held. All except the fact that I'd seen it. And they'd known I'd seen it. The officer beside me exhaled sharply. "You're lucky you left when you did." Lucky. Or just barely missed something I never should have been anywhere near. Either way, the lake kept its secret, frozen beneath dark water and ice. Trust your instincts, especially in isolated places. Curiosity can uncover truths you're not meant to face, and danger doesn't always announce itself. When something feels wrong, leave before it becomes a mistake you can't walk away from. Before the night everything changed, winter used to comfort me. I liked the quiet of it, the muffled sound of snow on rooftops, the soft glow from the neighbors' porch lights, the way everything felt paused. At 14, I thought I understood fear. I thought it belonged to horror movies, tests I hadn't studied for, or shadows I imagined in the hallway at night. But real fear? The kind that slides under your skin and stays there for years? I didn't meet that until one winter evening at my grandmother's house. My parents lived only 3 minutes away, so Grandma never worried about me staying alone there for a couple hours. Her house sat on an acre of land, ringed by tall pines that bowed under the weight of frost. The place had always felt safe, old but warm, with quilts on every chair and a wood stove that breathed softly through the night. That evening, snow drifted lazily past the windows. I kept one lamp on in the living room, reading while the house creaked and settled around me. Nothing seemed unusual, until the doorbell rang. It wasn't a timid ring. It was sharp, urgent. It cut through the silence like a blade. I hesitated before standing. Nobody came this far out unless they meant to. The woods swallowed sound out here. Even cars seemed quieter. But curiosity pushed me toward the door. When I stepped onto the porch, a cold gust slapped my face. Snowflakes clung to my eyelashes. And then I saw him. A man, barefoot, wearing tattered clothes soaked through with melting frost, stood by the front gate. His skin looked pale, almost bluish. His eyes, blank, unfocused, reflected the weak porch light like two pieces of glass. He tilted his head. "Just checking the trees," he whispered, breath curling into the frozen air. My heartbeat slammed against my ribs. His voice sounded thin, brittle, wrong, like he didn't use it often, or like he wasn't sure how. Before I could respond, he reached for the gate latch with a trembling hand. Then slowly, too slowly, he turned and slipped back into the dark fringe of pine trees. I ran inside and locked the door, and for the first time in my life, winter didn't feel peaceful anymore. It felt like a warning. I didn't sleep well that night. Every crack of the house settling made me jerk awake, convinced he was standing outside the window, staring in. By morning, the snow had already covered most of the footprints he'd left near the gate. My parents brushed the incident off. Probably some lost traveler, they said. Someone confused, someone harmless. But I couldn't shake the image of his eyes. Empty. Cold. Searching for something I didn't want to know. The next afternoon, my friend Jenna came over to keep me company. We loved hanging out at Grandma's place, watching TV, eating junk food, whispering about school drama. By evening, we'd almost convinced ourselves my encounter was nothing but a weird misunderstanding. Then the footsteps began. Soft at first. Snow crunching somewhere behind the house. Slow, measured, deliberate. Jenna muted the TV. "Tell me that's a deer." I didn't answer. I already knew it wasn't. We leaned toward the window, peeking through a crack in the curtains. The yard was dim, lit only by the porch lamp and the faint spill of moonlight. The trees cast long shadows across the snow. Nothing moved, but the footsteps kept circling. Around the house, pausing by the back door, then crunching toward the side windows. Jenna whispered, "We need to call your parents." Before I could grab my phone, someone knocked. 3 slow bangs on the front door, followed by a voice. "Let me use your phone." It was him, that same brittle, unnatural whisper. Jenna's face went white. "Oh my God." "Don't answer," I hissed. The doorknob rattled. Then, without warning, a heavy thump smashed against the living room window. Glass cracked. Snow blew inward. We screamed. And through the shattered pane, a hand appeared. Blue from cold, fingers curled like claws, pulling itself inside. We didn't stay to see the rest. We ran. We tore up the staircase, slipping on the wooden steps in our panic. I slammed the bedroom door behind us and locked it, then shoved a dresser against it with trembling hands. Jenna dialed 911, voice shaking so badly the operator had to tell her twice to slow down. I think someone broke in," she stammered. "We're upstairs. Please hurry." I pressed my ear to the door. Below us, the house creaked with movement. Footsteps, slow, wandering, sliding across the wooden floor as if he didn't care that he'd been caught breaking in, like the cold itself had seeped into him and numbed any sense of fear. Jenna covered her mouth, trying not to cry. Why is he doing this? I didn't have an answer. All I knew was that he was inside, leaving wet prints on the floor, prints that steamed faintly from the temperature difference. He was freezing, colder than he should have been even in that weather. We heard him breathing. A shallow rasp dragged through the halls. Then, floorboards groaning under weight, he reached the bottom of the stairs. I held my breath. One step creaked, then another, then another. He was climbing, closer and closer. I whispered, "Stay quiet. Don't move." My heartbeat thrummed in my ears so loudly I worried he'd hear it through the door. The steps stopped just outside the bedroom. For a moment, complete silence. Then, lightly, his fingers brushed the doorknob. Jenna clutched my arm. "He's right there." The knob turned. Once, twice, stopped by the lock. His breathing grew louder, like he was leaning his face close to the wood. A whisper, barely audible. "Trees. Frost on the trees. I felt nausea roll through me. It didn't make sense. None of this made sense. Sirens wailed faintly in the distance. He jerked away from the door. For several seconds, we heard rapid footsteps, down the stairs, across the floor, through the broken window. When police burst through the front door, we nearly collapsed with relief, but the nightmare wasn't over. He wasn't gone yet. The house filled with officers, their boots thudding through the hallway as they searched every room. One checked on us upstairs while another guided us carefully down the steps. The broken window let in a sharp draft, snow swirling against the furniture. "What did he look like?" one officer asked. I described him: the blank eyes, the tattered clothes, the whisper about checking the trees. The officer exchanged a look with his partner. A search team combed the yard, calling out commands as their flashlights cut through the night. Jenna and I huddled by the doorway, wrapped in blankets a paramedic handed us. Minutes later, a shout came from near the gate. "Got him!" 2 officers escorted the man through the snow. His hair hung wet around his face, his bare feet bright red from the cold. He didn't struggle. He didn't shout. He just stared ahead, swaying slightly with each step. When he passed us, he looked directly at me, and he smiled. Slow. Wrong. Like his face wasn't used to the motion. Softly, just loud enough for me to hear, he whispered, "The frost keeps the trees quiet." I recoiled. Jenna grabbed my sleeve. An officer pulled us aside. "You girls did the right thing. Listen, he's an escapee from the mental hospital 10 miles from here. Left the facility 2 days ago. They've been searching nonstop." My lungs tightened. "He wasn't dangerous until tonight," the officer continued. "He's been wandering the woods, delusional, fixated on the trees for some reason." I shuddered. "He came yesterday, too." The officer lifted his brow. "Barefoot?" I nodded. "Then you're lucky he didn't try anything then." They loaded him into the back of a patrol car. Even through the snow-blurred windows, I watched him. He didn't look afraid or angry. He looked focused, like the night still whispered secrets to him. As the car pulled away, he turned his head, staring at the house until the darkness swallowed the lights completely. Even after the officers left, the chill didn't fade. The house felt wrong, hollow, like the woods remembered him. And part of me was terrified he remembered the house too. The days that followed blurred together. I barely slept. Every creak made me flinch. Every gust of wind brushing the windows felt like fingers tapping on the glass. I kept replaying that moment. The whisper, the look in his eyes, the way he reached for the doorknob as if he already knew we were hiding upstairs. My parents tried to reassure me. "He's gone. He's locked away now. You're safe." But safety didn't feel real anymore. Not after seeing how easily a stranger slipped through a window, how quickly a quiet winter night could turn into something out of a nightmare. Jenna wasn't much better. She jumped at sudden noises in school. She avoided walking home alone. We barely talked about it because talking made it real again. The strange part? It wasn't the break-in that haunted me most. It was that first night. The way he stood barefoot in the snow, skin nearly blue, whispering about checking the trees. The way he moved, silent, slow, as if the cold didn't bother him at all. Police said he'd been off his medication, that he'd gotten lost, that he'd been hallucinating. And maybe that was true. Maybe he was just a broken man who wandered into the wrong yard. But even now, years later, when winter comes and frost clings to the trees outside my window, I still feel that same cold fear rise inside me. The kind you don't outgrow. The kind that sticks with you long after you've locked the doors. Every winter night after that, I double-check every window latch, every deadbolt, every curtain. Not because I believe he'll come back, but because I know now how thin the line between safety and danger really is. And how quickly someone can step across it. I used to love winter. Now I respect it. Because winter remembers, and so do I. Safety is never something to take for granted. Always trust your instincts, secure your home, and stay aware, because danger can appear in the quietest moments, from the quietest places, when you least expect it. People don't think of Utah's deserts as cold, but winter out there is a different kind of brutal one that sneaks up on you, stings through your jacket, and settles in your bones. I hadn't meant to spend the season in a place where even the tumbleweeds froze in place, but life doesn't always unfold how you plan it. I'd been living out of my old van for months, driving odd job to odd job. When I landed an overnight position at a lonely gas station about 40 miles from the nearest town, I figured it was temporary, just enough to fill my tank, refill my savings, and keep moving before winter stranded me. The station sat in the middle of nowhere, surrounded by miles of white desert. At night, the wind came screaming across the open flats, rattling signs, shaking the steel pump handles, and making every sound feel sharper. By midnight, the world felt empty. No headlights, no engines, no voices, just the hum of the fluorescent lights buzzing above me, and the way the cold seemed to seep through the glass even from inside. Around 1 a.m., I was stocking shelves when I heard it, the crunch of tires on frozen gravel. A dark sedan slid into the lot, fishtailing just slightly before stopping near the pump closest to the store entrance. The door chimed and a man stepped inside. He whistled. Not a tune I recognized, just a slow, off-key pattern that didn't match anything. He drifted through the aisles with this erratic, lazy pace, picking items up and setting them down like he couldn't remember what he was looking for. After 10 minutes of watching him wander, I walked toward him. "You doing all right, man?" I asked, trying to sound casual. He looked at me with eyes that didn't blink often enough. "Flat tire," he said. "Need a look." The way he said it made something cold crawl up my spine. But I followed him anyway, stepping into the icy desert night. And instantly, I regretted it. The wind hit me first sharp and immediate, cutting through my hoodie like it was paper. The man walked ahead of me without flinching. He didn't hunch his shoulders, didn't shove his hands deeper into his jacket. He just moved with this stiff, determined stride, as if the cold didn't apply to him. His sedan sat under the only working streetlight in the lot. The bulb flickered occasionally, making his shadow jump in odd shapes behind him. He pointed at the rear tire. Right there. I crouched beside it, my knees pressing into the frozen gravel. I pressed my hand against the rubber. It was fully inflated, warm even, like he'd been driving a long while. "This tire's fine," I said, glancing up. He didn't look at the tire. He looked at me. Just stared. No expression, no acknowledgement. His hand stayed buried in his jacket pocket, gripping something tight enough that I saw his forearm tense beneath the fabric. A wave of unease hit me so intensely, I stood up too quickly, brushing off my hands. "Look, man," I said, stepping backward. "If you need help, we can call roadside assistance, but there's nothing wrong with the tire." He took a slow step toward me. Instinct told me to move. My throat tightened. The desert felt suddenly too big, too empty, and painfully silent. I backed toward the entrance, each breath turning to fog in front of me. But when I reached the door and pushed, he moved faster than I expected, blocking half the entrance with his arm stretched across the frame. "You live here?" he asked quietly. "No," I said. "Just working. Store's closing soon." He smiled a little, but it wasn't the kind of smile that reached the eyes, more like something he'd seen other people do and was mimicking without understanding. The wind whipped around us, the lights buzzed, the whole desert waited. Something was wrong with him, wrong in a way I couldn't name but could feel in every instinct I had left. And then, before I could decide what to do, he bolted, just turned and sprinted into the dark, his boots crunching across the frozen ground until the sound vanished completely. I stood there shaking, not from the cold, but from the realization that the night wasn't over. Not even close. The moment he disappeared into the darkness, the world around me went quiet again, too quiet. I stood frozen in the doorway, my breath fogging the air, listening for any sign he might come back. The desert had a way of swallowing sound, but even then, I should have heard something. A footstep, a cough, anything. Nothing. My hands shook as I locked the door, double-checking it twice. I paced behind the counter, staring out the window every few seconds, half expecting his face to appear between the flickering streetlights. I knew I should call someone.
But calling the police over a strange conversation and a not flat tire felt dramatic, and I didn't want to be the kind of guy who panicked over nothing. Still, something about that stare. The way he blocked the door. The way he looked at me like he was choosing something. I grabbed my phone and dialed the non-emergency line anyway. "Yeah," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "There was a man here acting strange, said he had a flat tire. He didn't, then he took off running." The dispatcher asked a dozen questions: description, car type, behavior. I answered everything, feeling more uneasy with each detail I remembered. "Officers are already in the area investigating something nearby," she finally said. "We'll send someone to check the station." Investigating what? She didn't explain, and I didn't ask. I just hung up and locked the office door too. Minutes dragged by like hours. The heater clicked loudly in the quiet store, and I flinched every time. I kept replaying the moment outside, the way he hovered too close, the way his hand never left that pocket. I hadn't seen a weapon, but I had felt one. Felt the threat of it. Around 2 a.m., headlights lit up the front windows. A sheriff's SUV rolled into the lot, tires crunching that same frozen gravel. 2 officers stepped inside. "You the one who called?" one asked. I nodded. The other officer's radio crackled. "Suspect last seen heading northbound, possibly armed." Armed? The word made my stomach drop. "What's going on?" I asked. They exchanged a look. "He fits the description of someone involved in a serious crime near the border. We've been tracking his vehicle for an hour." My knees felt weak. "He was here," I whispered. "Right here." The officer nodded. "And you're lucky he left." Lucky. Lucky that he ran. Lucky he didn't finish whatever he'd started. I wasn't sure I believed in luck anymore. The officers asked to look around outside, so I grabbed my jacket and followed them back into the biting wind. The desert was a pale, shimmering expanse under the harsh floodlights. Snow twirled in thin spirals across the pavement, making the whole place look abandoned. We circled the lot. The man's footprints led into the open desert, but the wind had already started erasing them. The officers scanned the sand with their flashlights, the beams slicing through the dark. "Based on the direction he ran," one officer said, "he's probably trying to reach the old service road, cuts toward the border towns." I swallowed. "And you think he's dangerous?" The officer stopped, turning to look at me fully. "He's beyond dangerous. We think he assaulted someone near the border, possibly worse." A chill that had nothing to do with the cold crept up my spine. I imagined him standing inches from me, blocking the door, hand in his jacket. I imagined how easily that moment could have gone a different way. "What would he want with me?" I whispered. "Opportunity," the officer said bluntly. "People like him don't need reasons." A heavy silence fell between us. The gas station hummed in the background, lonely and exposed in the wide desert. "We'll stay nearby a while," the officer said. "He might double back. They tend to do that." I didn't ask who times they times meant. I didn't want to know. The officers eventually left to continue the search, but they promised to return if anything turned up. I watched their SUV disappear down the highway until the taillights faded completely. Then the quiet came back. The cold came back. The isolation came back. I stood outside a moment longer, staring at the vast darkness stretching out in all directions. Nothing moved. No cars passed. The desert didn't breathe. And somewhere out there, a man who nearly cornered me was running through the snow. I went back inside, locked the door again, and sat behind the counter with every light on. I didn't sleep. I didn't blink much either. By sunrise, the officers returned with an update. They'd found the man's car abandoned 20 miles away, half buried in drifting snow. He'd continued on foot. They eventually caught him near an abandoned radio tower, shivering but still trying to run. One of the officers walked into the station, stamping snow off his boots. "He won't be bothering you again," he said. But he didn't say it with much relief, more like exhausted resignation, as if he'd seen too many close calls in these empty deserts. "Did he admit anything?" I asked quietly. The officer hesitated. "He won't talk. But based on what we found, you're lucky, real lucky." That word again. Lucky. But it didn't feel like luck. It felt like I'd been inches from something violent and irreversible, something that would have left my van abandoned in the parking lot, my name on a report, my story unfinished. For days afterward, every time the door chimed, my pulse spiked. Every time headlights swept across the window, my hands tensed. I slept with a knife in my van and kept the heater running even when I couldn't afford it, just so the silence never returned. Even now, years later, when I drive through wide-open places, when I stop at lonely gas stations in the middle of winter, I remember that night. I remember his stare. I remember how the cold desert made everything sharper, clearer how exposed I was out there. And I remember the sickening realization that not every threat announces itself loudly. Some just whistle quietly in the aisles. Some smile without meaning it. Some run when their moment passes, leaving you with a lifetime of wondering what might have happened if you hesitated a second longer. Winter never stopped feeling cold after that. But it started feeling honest. Because out there in the desert night, I learned the truth. Danger has footsteps, but sometimes it walks right beside you before you ever hear them. Trust your instincts, especially when they whisper instead of scream. Danger does not always arrive loudly. Sometimes it comes quietly, through a smile, a question, or a request that feels wrong. Your intuition is often the first and strongest warning you'll ever get. I always believed the woods were the last honest place left. I'd grown up wandering through forests where snow softened the world and trees groaned quietly in the wind. When life felt crowded, loud, or messy, I retreated into the wilderness like it was a second home. Even in winter, the woods made more sense to me than people ever did. That late winter hike was supposed to be a reset button, one final trip before spring thawed the trails and the crowds came back. I chose a narrow, secluded path deep in the national forest, one so overgrown and ignored that most hikers didn't bother with it. That was exactly why I picked it. I didn't want company. I didn't want conversation. I wanted the kind of quiet that pressed against your ears and made you remember you were small in the best way possible. The trail was cloaked in snow that crunched beneath my boots. Every step felt crisp and deliberate. Frost clung to the branches like white lace, and the cold wind slipped through the trees in long, sighing breaths. I'd been hiking for hours when I saw a structure tucked between two leaning pines. An old cabin. A cabin I had never seen before. I stopped where the trail bent sharply and peered through the underbrush. The building sagged under its own weight. Its roof dipped inward. Shingles scattered across the snow. The doorway was nothing but a gaping black hole, the door long gone, leaving the interior exposed. I should have kept walking, but curiosity has a way of making you careless. The snow around the cabin looked disturbed, as if someone had been pacing or dragging something across the yard. Still, I stepped closer, drawn in by the strange stillness around it. The cabin looked like it hadn't been touched in decades. That's why the noise startled me so badly. A loud thump, sharp, violent, echoed from behind me. I spun around, and that's when I saw him. A man standing in the shadows, pale-faced, blank-eyed, unmoving, and every instinct I had told me I should have never come here alone. The man looked like he had stepped out of some forgotten era, ragged clothing, boots torn open at the seams, cheeks hollow, hair wild and matted. Snow clung to his sleeves like he'd been standing there for a long time. He didn't blink. He didn't speak. He didn't move. Just stared. My throat tightened as the icy wind cut between us. I managed a shaky whisper. Sorry. Sorry, I didn't know anyone was here. Still nothing. No reaction. His expression held that unsettling emptiness I've only seen in people who've lived too long with something dark gnawing at them. I lifted my hand slightly, trying to show I meant no harm. I'm just passing through. Didn't mean to disturb anything. His head tilted just a fraction, enough to make the hair on the back of my neck rise. I stepped backward, boot crunching loudly in the snow. He didn't follow, but the stillness around him felt like a trap waiting to be sprung. He blended into the cabin's shadow too easily, as if he'd come from it. I'll be going now, I murmured. His eyes tracked me, but he never moved. The moment I broke the cabin's perimeter and stepped onto the trail again, I turned and walked. Not fast, not slow, just steady. I didn't dare look back for the first several minutes, not until my nerves forced me to. When I finally glanced over my shoulder, the clearing was empty. No man, no movement, just the cabin sitting there like a mouth waiting to swallow something. But the snow told a different story. Fresh prints behind mine. Not close yet, but close enough that he'd taken a few steps after I turned away. My pulse thundered. I faced the trail again and quickened my pace. Every so often, I checked the snow behind me, looking for new prints, new signs he might be following. Nothing. Only the wind brushing through the trees and my own uncertainty chewing at me. By dusk, I forced myself to set up camp miles away, convincing myself I'd overreacted. But fear has a way of correcting you in the dead of night. Because that man hadn't stayed by the cabin, and he wasn't done watching me. When the sun dropped behind the ridge, the temperature plummeted fast. I pitched my small backpacking tent beneath a cluster of pines, the ground packed with icy needles and wind-blown snow. I heated a small meal, forcing myself to relax. The rational side of me argued that the man was probably just a recluse, someone living off the grid, maybe even mentally ill or confused. Nothing more. But the woods felt different now, quieter, as if holding still. Eventually, exhaustion won over adrenaline. I slid into my sleeping bag, zipped the tent flap halfway for ventilation, and tried to sleep. I don't know how long I was out before a faint crunch jolted me awake. Not branches, not wind, footsteps. Slow, deliberate, right outside my tent. My pulse spiked instantly. My eyes adjusted to the moonlit silhouette of the fabric. Shadows shifted soft at first, then sharper. Then something leaned into view. A face, pressed close to the half-open flap, staring in. Moonlight caught his eyes just right, making them look reflective, glassy. His breath didn't fog the air the way mine did. He was too still, too controlled. For a moment, neither of us moved. Then he did something that chilled me more than the cold ever could. He smiled just slightly, like he was satisfied I'd woken up. I jerked upright, gasping. The moment I made noise, he stepped back, melting into the shadows between the trees with this unnatural quiet. I fumbled for my flashlight, hand shaking so badly I dropped it twice. When I finally got it on and shined it outside, the beam revealed only empty forest. A few footprints circled the tent in chaotic loops, then disappeared into the dark. He'd been walking around me as I slept, circling, watching. I didn't pack up. I didn't waste a second. I tore down camp as fast as I ever have in my life, shoving everything into my pack in a frantic mess. The trees closed around me as I began the long trek back. Every sound felt like a footfall. Every shadow looked like a man. And the trail suddenly felt too narrow, too isolated, for anything good to happen next. The trail was barely visible in the moonlight, but I didn't dare wait until morning. My boots skidded on icy roots as I pushed through the narrow path I had been so proud to choose earlier. Now it felt like a trap, two walls of trees closing around me, funneling me forward with nowhere to hide if he reappeared. My breath plumed in front of me in frantic bursts. Every few yards, I glanced back, expecting to see a figure emerging from the dark, but the forest stayed stubbornly empty. Still, I wasn't convinced he was gone. The strange thing was how the snow betrayed me. My prints were clear, deep, easy to follow. His, on the other hand, blurred into the terrain, soft marks in the powder that looked lighter, quicker, harder to track, like he knew how to move through the woods without being caught. The wind roared through the pines, sending showers of frost cascading onto the trail. Somewhere behind me, a branch snapped. I froze. "Hello?" I whispered, voice trembling. Silence. I backed up until my shoulder hit a tree. "Listen, I don't want any trouble," I called out. "I'm leaving. I'm gone." No response, just the long, low groan of old branches swaying. Maybe he was never there. Maybe my mind had created a monster out of loneliness and night. But then I saw it half hidden behind a log. A fresh footprint, bigger than mine, pointing toward me. I didn't think. I ran. Branches slashed at my jacket. Snow flew beneath my boots. My lungs burned with cold air as I tore through the trail like I'd never run before. Finally, after what felt like hours, the thick trees thinned out. The trail widened, the outlines of the parking area barely visible through the dark. My car sat there like salvation. I stumbled the last 50 yards, slid across icy gravel, and dove into the driver's seat. When I locked the door and looked back toward the trail, the forest edge seemed to shift, like something had just stepped out of view. I didn't wait to find out. I floored the gas and didn't look back. I drove until my fingers stopped shaking, and the heater finally thawed the ice out of my bones. By the time I reached the nearest ranger station, the sun was rising behind the mountains. I stumbled inside, exhausted and wide-eyed, explaining everything: the cabin, the man, the face at my tent flap. 2 rangers took notes, exchanged looks, and finally said what I dreaded hearing: "You're not the first person to report someone out there." That sentence hit me harder than the cold ever had. They'd never found a name, never located an official residence, but hikers occasionally came back frightened, claiming to see a man living deep off-trail, usually near abandoned structures. "He doesn't talk to us," a ranger admitted. "Every time we try to approach, he vanishes. Some think he's a transient. Others, well, we don't know." They asked if I wanted to make an official report. I did, but even as I wrote it down, the memory felt unreal, like something from a nightmare I hadn't fully woken from. Before I left, the ranger gave me one last piece of advice. "Some parts of these woods aren't meant for solo travel. Not anymore." I believed him. I still love the forest, but I've never returned to that trail. The memory of that pale face, pressed close to my tent flap, still surfaces whenever wind rattles my windows at night. Sometimes I dream of that cabin, doorless, rotting, filled with shadows, and sometimes I wonder what would have happened if I hadn't woken up when I did. If he had stepped inside, if he had been waiting for something more. When people ask why I stopped solo winter camping, I tell them the truth. Because not everything in the woods is a story. Some things are warnings, and some warnings look you right in the eyes. No matter how confident you are in your skills or how peaceful a place once felt, always trust your instincts. Safety isn't just about preparation, it's about recognizing when a situation turns wrong and acting before it's too late. I used to think long drives were a kind of therapy. Something about the hum of the tires and the open road had always calmed me, especially when life felt unstable. But that winter, the winter I moved cross-country to start over, cured me of that belief for good. The storm had rolled in faster than the weather reports predicted. 1 hour the sky was a soft gray, and the next it was a full whiteout. Flakes whipping across the windshield like 1,000 desperate hands trying to pull me off the road. I'd been driving for nearly 14 hours, fueled by cheap gas station coffee and the pressure of everything I was running from. A broken job, an empty apartment, a feeling that I'd stayed too long in a life that didn't belong to me. Somewhere between exhaustion and panic, I spotted a small green sign half buried in snow. Pine Rest Motel, 1 mile. It felt less like a suggestion and more like a lifeline. The motel sat tucked into the woods, half swallowed by pines, its roof sagging under layers of untouched snow. Only one window glowed dimly, flickering like a dying candle. The parking lot was mostly empty, save for a single plow truck coated in ice. Everything else was silent, too silent. Inside the front office, a bored-looking clerk barely glanced up long enough to slide me a key. "Room 7, he muttered. "Just don't break anything. Heating's finicky." The room was exactly what you'd expect from a place that probably hadn't seen a renovation since before I was born. Peeling wallpaper, a sagging mattress, a faint smell of mildew buried under a stronger smell of stale cigarettes. But it was warm, and right then, warmth meant safety. At least, that's what I told myself. The snow outside had started falling in thick, heavy sheets. I kicked off my boots, sank into the old mattress, and let the heater drone me toward sleep. That was when I heard the footsteps. Slow, heavy, snow crunching directly outside my door, like someone was walking the row of rooms, checking each one. At first, I tried to explain it away: settling snow, maybe another guest running late, maybe the motel clerk doing a perimeter check. But the sound wasn't random. It had rhythm, weight, and direction. Crunch, crunch, pause, crunch. It moved along the walkway outside the room, stopping at intervals right where each door was. I lay perfectly still, suddenly aware of how thin the walls felt, how flimsy the lock on my door looked when I'd closed it earlier. The footsteps came closer. I held my breath. Then the doorknob jiggled. Not lightly, not accidentally. Someone tested it with purpose. My entire body seized up. Whoever it was stayed there for a moment long enough that I could hear their breathing, slow and steady, right on the other side of the door. Then a deep voice called out, sharp and irritated. "Hey, who's in there?" I didn't answer. My pulse hammered in my ears. The voice came again, louder. "This is my room. You pay for it?" A fist slammed the door. "This room is mine. Open up." I forced myself to speak, though my voice came out cracked and shaky. I got it from the front desk. You must have the wrong room." Silence. Then he tried the handle again, twisting hard. I stared at the deadbolt, praying it would hold. Seconds later, I heard the crunch of more footsteps approaching. Another man. His voice was lower, muffled, but the words were unmistakable. "Try it again. Move aside. I got something for it." Metal scraped against the lock. Something like a tool digging into the latch. That snapped me out of my frozen panic. I lunged forward, gripping the door with both hands just as the bigger man shoved against it. The whole frame rattled. "Open the door," he yelled. "No," I shouted back, pushing with all my weight. The men cursed under their breath. The metal tool clanged, slipping, and one of them hissed in pain. For a split second, they hesitated. Then the second voice muttered, "Forget it. Let's go." Their footsteps retreated into the night swift, angry, disappearing toward the end of the walkway. I waited, listening. The forest swallowed them whole. I backed away from the door and pressed my ear to the cold wall. Nothing. No footsteps, no low voices. Just the wind threading its way through the pines like a warning. I grabbed my phone and dialed 911. My hands shook so violently I dropped the phone twice before getting the call through. 2 men tried to break into my room, I told the dispatcher. They said it was theirs. They tried to pry the lock open. The dispatcher kept her tone calm, but I could hear the urgency tightening each question. "Are you safe right now?" "Yes." "Are they inside?" "No." "Stay on the line. Officers are on the way." The next 20 minutes stretched into something unrecognizable, half fear, half disbelief. Part of me kept expecting the handle to twist again, for the door to burst inward, for that deep voice to return with something worse than threats. Instead, the only thing I heard was the blizzard hammering the walls. When headlights finally swept across the snow outside my window, I nearly collapsed with relief. I rushed out to meet the officers, my breath fogging the frigid air. "There's no car?" I asked when they said the lot was empty. "Just yours," one officer replied, "and the plow truck." "But they were here, I heard them. They tried to." "We believe you," the officer interrupted gently, "but their tracks don't start anywhere near the road." "What does that mean?" He aimed his flashlight toward the tree line. Fresh footprints punched through the snow, leading directly into the forest. No tire marks, no signs of a vehicle ever being there. "They came from the woods," he said, and went back into them. Something cold and heavy settled in my chest. The officers swept the area, scouring the nearby rooms, the office, the tree line. Nothing. Not a trace of the 2 men who had tried to force their way into my room. By the time they finished, the storm had grown too severe for them to stay longer. They told me to keep the door locked, call immediately if I heard anything else, and wait out the night. I did, but sleep was out of the question. At dawn, the storm eased. The officers returned to do a broader search before I checked out. I followed them outside, the cold biting my lungs with every breath. The footprints were even clearer in daylight, 2 sets, large, deep, moving along the row of motel rooms. Each stopped at a door, each tested a handle. My room last. "They did this systematically," one officer said. "They were looking for an easy entry." "But where did they come from?" I asked. The officer pointed his gloved hand beyond the building. There. The tracks led behind the motel into a dense thicket of pines. The snow was piled waist deep. No sane person would walk through it without snow gear or a clear destination. Except, these men had. The officers followed the tracks for almost a mile before returning, their faces tight. "Find anything?" I asked. "An old fire pit," one answered. "And what looked like a temporary shelter." My skin prickled. "So they were living out there?" "Looks that way." The idea of those men lurking in the woods watching the motel, watching the guests, waiting for the right night, made the air feel even colder. The officers helped me gather my things. I checked out without seeing the clerk again. The office was empty, the heater still humming behind the counter. It felt abandoned, like no one had been in there for hours. Before getting into my car, one officer placed a hand on my shoulder. "You got lucky," he said. "Whatever they wanted, it wasn't just a room." I nodded, throat tight. Driving away, I looked at the motel shrinking in my rear view, a lonely structure swallowed by trees, by winter, by something far darker. A trap. And I had walked right into it. The further I drove from the motel, the more the world seemed to thaw, not physically, but mentally. The storm eased, sunlight broke through, and the road stretched ahead like a clean slate. But my nerves stayed tangled. Every noise made me flinch. Every glance at the rearview mirror felt like a check for figures emerging from the woods. My brain replayed the moment the men shoved against the door, the guttural sounds of their breathing, the metal tool scraping, the unspoken threat in the way they moved. Hours later, at a busier gas station off the highway, I finally stopped and tried to process the night. A woman filling her tank beside me noticed my shaking hands. "You all right?" she asked kindly. I forced a weak smile. "Long night. You never want to stay in the tiny places during winter," she warned. "Too many people know they're isolated." Her words cut a little deeper than she intended. That night taught me something I hadn't understood before. Isolation doesn't just mean quiet or peace. It also means vulnerability. Out there, in the frozen woods, I could have vanished without a trace. No cameras, no witnesses, no chance. And those men, they weren't passing through. They were living there, waiting. I wondered how many nights they'd spent watching the motel from the trees, studying the lights, the doors, the vulnerable guests, just looking for rest. I didn't feel lucky. I felt spared. By the time I reached my new city 2 days later, I was still shaken, but I was alive and determined never to let exhaustion cloud my instincts again. Because the world isn't divided into safe and unsafe places. It's divided into moments, and one moment of awareness can save your life. Trust your instincts, especially when you're tired, isolated, or unsure. Desperation makes people take risks, but awareness keeps you alive. Safety is rarely about strength. It's about recognizing danger before it reaches your door. I've always believed that the night a person remembers most is never announced. It doesn't arrive with a warning or a sense of doom. It just walks in quietly, sits itself down in the middle of your life, and waits for you to notice. That's how it was for me, 28 years old, exhausted, stubborn, and too proud to admit I should have closed early instead of trying to be the hero during a monster of a snowstorm. I'd been the night manager at a small-town 24-hour fast food place just off Interstate 91. It wasn't glamorous, but it paid my rent and kept me fed, and after a while it became my routine. On most nights the drive-through was steady enough that the hours slipped by without much thought. But that night, the sky had opened like it was trying to bury the world. Corporate didn't want us closing unless there was an actual power outage, so when my last 2 employees begged me to let them clock out early before the roads turned to ice, I didn't argue. I sent them home and told myself I'd handle the rest of the shift alone. I'd done it before. The difference was that the other nights didn't feel like the world outside wanted to swallow the building whole. The wind slammed against the windows so hard the glass shivered. Snowflakes hummed across the metal siding like sand against a tin can. The parking lot lights were nothing but faint blurs behind walls of white. If the world had ended outside, I wouldn't have known. I was wiping down the front counter when the first bang hit. A sharp, violent thud rattled the front glass doors, echoing off the empty booths. I froze, cloth in hand. The second hit was harder, more desperate. Through the frost-slicked doors, a shadow leaned forward, breath fogging the glass from the outside. A man, a large one, wearing a coat crusted with snow and sleeves soaked to the elbows. "Hey," I shouted, stepping toward the door. "Dining room's closed, drive-through only." He didn't move, didn't turn, didn't respond. He just pressed his face closer, smearing frost with the side of his cheek as if trying to look past me, or into me. His eyes were pale and strange. I couldn't tell if he was angry, freezing, or just wrong. I backed away, my pulse thudding through my neck. Alone in the building, no backup, no customers, only me and the storm and a stranger who didn't seem to care that he wasn't supposed to be inside. I didn't know it yet, but that was only the beginning. "Sir, you need to go around to the drive-through window," I repeated, louder this time, trying to inject some authority into a voice that definitely didn't feel authoritative. "I can't unlock the doors." He still didn't acknowledge me, not even a nod. Just that same slow breathing against the door, fog blooming around the shape of his face. The lights above him flickered, creating a strobe effect that made him look like he was shifting in and out of reality. I grabbed my radio out of habit before remembering there was no one left to hear me. The dining area was darker than usual, the storm outside choking out most of the security lights. I reached for my phone in my pocket, just in case, though I didn't call anyone yet. I still wanted to believe it was just some freezing guy looking for shelter. "Sir," I tried again, "you can't be back here. If you need help, I can call someone." Something about that finally made him move. His head snapped toward me so fast it looked unnatural, like a marionette tugged by invisible strings. Our eyes met through the glass, and something tightened in my gut. His lips moved, but I couldn't hear anything through the glass, only the muffled groan of the storm. "I can't hear you," I said, inching backward. Then he slammed his fist against the door again hard enough that I took a full step back. The boom rang through the empty lobby like thunder. His other hand clawed at the door handle even though the inside lock was bolted. He rattled it over and over, shoulders jerking like he expected the metal to bend. That's when the fear switched from, "This is weird," to, "This is dangerous." I retreated behind the counter, never taking my eyes off him. That's when he stopped abruptly. His head tilted to the side, listening to something I couldn't hear. Then slowly, deliberately, he walked away from the door. I exhaled, relieved, but the relief was short-lived. The drive-through camera screen blinked once, static washing over the image. When the picture returned, the drive-through lane was empty. He hadn't gone to his car. In fact, I hadn't seen a car at all. I leaned closer to the monitor, squinting at the swirling snow. "Where the hell did you go?" A rattling noise crawled down the back wall of the building. It sounded like metal being dragged against metal. I walked to the rear of the store, each footstep echoing far too loudly. Above the soda storage room was a maintenance ladder on the outside wall, a ladder almost no one knew about except employees. The sound came from that direction. Something or someone was climbing. Panic built like smoke in my chest. I ran to the back door and threw the deadbolt shut. Wind howled. Snow hit the roof in waves, and over all of it, I heard footsteps, not on the ground, on the roof. Slow, heavy, deliberate. I wasn't alone anymore. I don't remember deciding to move. I just remember my legs carrying me toward the kitchen like instinct took over. The rooftop maintenance hatch sat above the walk-in freezer, a metal rectangle we only touched when an HVAC tech came once a year. The inside latch was old, but secure, at least it had always been secure. The footsteps overhead shifted direction, crunching through inches of fresh snow. Weight pressed down on the ceiling tiles. My breath fogged in front of me, even though the store was heated. My hands shook as I grabbed the broom handle, holding it like a baseball bat. The hatch let out a soft metallic clink. My blood turned ice cold. The latch was being tested, nudged, pressed. The kind of pressure someone uses when they're checking if something is locked, or if someone is on the other side. "Don't open," I whispered to myself. "Don't you dare open." The metal creaked. A thin line of cold air pressed through the crack as the hatch lifted no more than half an inch. Just enough. Enough for me to see the eye. A single pale eye staring straight down at me through the gap, wide, unblinking. Frost clung to the eyelashes, melting slowly as warm air kissed the edges. I stumbled back, knocking over a stack of paper cup sleeves. They scattered across the floor like oversized confetti. The eye didn't blink, didn't flinch. It looked at me the way you look at a thing, not a person. Then the hatch pushed up slightly more. I screamed, the broom clattering to the tiles. I didn't think I grabbed my phone and ran for the back exit. My fingers fumbled with the deadbolt, slipping on the cold metal, before finally ripping the door open. A violent blast of wind shoved against me, snowflakes pelting my face so hard they stung. Behind me, something shifted on the roof, fast. I sprinted across the loading zone toward the employee parking lot. Snow swallowed my ankles as I fought my way through it. The storm felt alive, biting at my cheeks, pushing against my chest, dragging at my clothes. I kept expecting to see the man jump off the roof, or crawl down the side of the building, or appear in front of me through the blizzard. I dove into my car, slammed the door shut, and locked it 3 times. My hands shook so badly I dropped my keys between the seats. When I finally jammed the key into the ignition, the engine coughed twice before roaring to life. Hot, terrified breath fogged the windshield. I called 911 with numb fingers. "My name is," I stammered. There's someone on the roof. Someone was trying to get inside. I don't know where he is. Please, please send someone. Stay in your vehicle, the dispatcher said calmly. Officers are on the way. But staying put felt like waiting to be hunted, and I wasn't entirely sure I had escaped him. Red and blue lights broke through the storm 15 minutes later, 2 cruisers fighting their way through the unplowed lot. I honked to get their attention, desperate, terrified, and half convinced the man was still somewhere nearby. 2 officers approached my car, flashlights slicing through the snow. I rolled my window down only an inch, just enough to hear. "You the caller?" one of them asked. "Yes," I breathed, unsure if I should cry or pass out. "Stay in the vehicle. We'll take a look." I watched them cross the lot, their outlines blurring in the wind. One headed toward the main doors, another circled the back toward the loading zone. The lights from their flashlights jittered across the windows of the restaurant. 5 minutes passed, then 10. Finally, one officer returned to my car and motioned for me to step out. The wind hit me like a slap. I wrapped my arms around myself. "You said someone was on the roof," he prompted. "Yes," I said, voice shaky. "You can see the disturbed snow." He was walking around up there, it sounded like heavy steps, and he opened the maintenance hatch. I saw, my throat locked up. I saw his eye. The officer didn't mock me, didn't look skeptical, but something about his expression tightened, the way a person reacts when they hear something unsettling that doesn't make sense. "We didn't find anyone inside," he said. "No forced entry. All doors are secured." "What about the roof?" "That's the part that's strange." I felt all the blood drain from my face. "What do you mean?" He gestured for me to follow. We trudged toward the back of the building. Snow battered us from every direction. When we reached the loading dock, he pointed upward with his flashlight. The beam illuminated the roof edge and the ladder. Snow was brushed off half of the rungs, like someone had climbed up recently. Footprints dotted the roofline, deep, uneven impressions in the snow. But they didn't form a coherent trail. They looked scattered, erratic, almost like the man had paced back and forth. "What about the other side?" I asked, shivering. "We checked," he said. "But here's the problem." He turned the light downward. Under the ladder, the snow was untouched. No footprints. No marks. No path to or from the ladder. It made no sense. None. "How could he get up there without leaving prints?" I whispered. The officer's jaw tightened. "We don't know, but we'll keep checking." "Did you find any footprints around the front doors?" "Only a few, and they stopped before reaching the lot. After that, nothing." I hugged myself tighter. I wanted answers. I wanted this to make sense. But the storm swallowed all evidence, the way it swallowed sound. "So what do I do now?" I asked quietly. "Go home," the officer said gently. "We'll file a report. We'll monitor the area. But it looks like whoever it was left the scene." His words should have comforted me. But the only thing I could think about was the eye in the hatch, and what it wanted. I didn't sleep when I got home. I sat on my couch, wrapped in 2 blankets, lights on, TV muted, staring at the wall as snow continued to fall outside. Every bang from the building frame settling made my heart skip. Every gust of wind made me flinch. My mind replayed the moment the hatch cracked open, the pale eye, the breath fogging the glass door, the heavy steps above me. By morning, the storm had calmed. The world outside glowed white under pale winter sun, quiet and deceptively peaceful. My phone buzzed a call from corporate. I braced myself. "You left the store unattended?" "There was a man trying to break in," I said tiredly. "I called the police. They told me to leave." Corporate sighed like I had inconvenienced them. "Well, next time you need to." "I'm not coming in today," I cut in. "I'm not opening that building alone." A pause, then it clipped. "Fine." After hanging up, I made coffee, though I doubted caffeine could fix the bone-deep exhaustion. A soft knock came at my door. It was Officer Ramirez, the one who had shown me the footprints. "Mind if I come in for a minute?" he asked. I nodded, stepping aside. "We finished the search this morning once visibility improved. We didn't find any signs of someone sleeping inside, hiding, or forcing entry." "Okay," I murmured, knowing that wasn't the end of it. "But we did find something else." He reached into his coat pocket and pulled out a small evidence bag. Inside was something thin and pale. A torn strip of fabric, frozen stiff. "We found this caught on the edge of the roof hatch," he said. "The material looks old, very old." I swallowed hard. "You still think it was a person, right?" He hesitated, and that hesitation spoke louder than words. "We think someone was trying to scare you. People do strange things during storms. But you don't know for sure?" "No," he admitted. "We don't." He handed me his card. "If you remember anything else, call me, and don't work alone on nights like that anymore." After he left, I sat near the window, watching snow drip from the eaves. I tried to tell myself it was over, that the man, whoever he was long gone. But part of me knew better, because sometimes people don't break in to steal, or hurt, or even get warm. Sometimes they break in just to see the fear in your eyes, and sometimes they don't break in at all. They just watch.